This is Bringing the Darkness to the Light with Catherine Nadal, professional psychic medium.
Today's guest is Kenneth Drake. He is considered Hollywood's haunted psychic. It's a pleasure to have you on, Kenneth.
Catherine, hi. So great to be with you. I can't believe this is finally happening.
I
love
know.
it so
I
much.
know.
Thank you for this.
Oh, I know. It's a lot of fun. You know, you and I have worked together. Actually, we met each other in Connecticut last summer.
Right.
And then we saw each other again in Salem in October, and both of us were there. Charles Rosenet had invited us as psychic mediums, and our tables were like very close to each other, and we just got to talking, and we just totally hit it off, and we thought it was just like tremendous. So every time I talk to you, I'm like, oh my God, like it's a lot of fun. You're fun.
I feel the same way. And you meet those people, and as soon as you meet them, you just feel that instant connection. And I felt that with you. One of the most fabulous people I know. Congratulations to you on the success of this hit show. You're doing incredible things.
Thank you. So I always say fun people make fun friends. So I'm very glad that you're a fun friend for me. So I wanted to go back in time. I know that you've done a lot of work as a professional psychic medium. You're currently still giving readings. You're doing a lot of public appearances and signings. So I'm kind of interested to go back to how was Kenneth as a little boy? Like, where did you grow up? That's the stuff that I really want to know.
Yeah, to even start that story, we've got to go way back and then down to the South. I'm originally from the South, the rural South of the middle of the Bible Belt in central Alabama. And of course, having some of these experiences years ago growing up, couldn't really talk about it because this was, of course, the work of the devil, as I was told. This is witchcraft. And started having these experiences there, though never really knew what to do with that. And but that was the world that I came from. Very, very southern, very rural. I believe there was one stop sign in the entire town, and that was it. So as rural as you could possibly imagine, that's where I came from. Even though people may have seen me at shows or events or when you and I are together, and sometimes don't really know that this started in a very rural place where you didn't really know what to do with it. And even when you had these experiences, you couldn't really talk about it.
So what was home like? Did you live with your parents? Did you live with grandparents? What did the home life look like for you?
Oh, that's such a great question. This is already my favorite interview. That's such a great question. Something I don't normally get a chance to talk about. So when I was 12, my parents divorced, moved in with my grandparents. And so my grandparents, for me, were such a big part of my upbringing. And that's really sort of what opened the world to spirituality for me. Growing up in the church, in the Bible Belt, I would say they were influential in helping push me into, at the time, what we would call ministry, because I was very, very much in the church world, in organized religion. Then it was such a big part of my life. And so when you have these experiences, or when I began having these experiences, that was really the world that I had to turn to. So I became an ordained minister and very Pentecostal, charismatic background. And I attribute my mother and also my grandparents for that, for really helping to push me in that direction. And so I became an ordained minister. It was beginning seminary. And then it got to the point where just realized that with these experiences, it didn't really fit as well into that world. And that's really what began to open up this doorway to spiritualism. But I always have to say, whether I'm doing a show or whether I'm on a stage somewhere, I have to thank my family for not locking me away in a padded cell somewhere when God knows they probably should have multiple times, and put them through so much with me fighting my experiences, them standing beside me through so much of my success. I owe specifically to my mother, but to my family that stood beside me all these years.
I find it so interesting because when I was a little girl, my father was very religious, but my family was Roman Catholic. So what was the actual religion? When you say Pentecostal, what is the formed religion?
Oh, such a great question. I can so relate to that. I have so many of my friends now are from that background with Roman Catholicism. Growing up, I had these experiences where, in very, very, I would say, deeply rural South, where you see revivals, these very fiery, sort of charismatic revivals. And maybe that's, I have to think, sometimes looking back, maybe that's where I learned a little bit of time on stages then, because there was this theatrical element to it, and it was fun. I enjoyed that. You have the full bands, the choirs, and these larger than life personalities talking about the Holy Ghost, fire, visions, angels. So all of these experiences that I grew up in, and believed all of that. And for me, it wasn't a show. It was everything that I had, and I genuinely believed that. And so then you get into these experiences of visions, and that was very common in the Pentecostal background, talking about visions, dreams, prophecy, things such as that. And so these experiences then, as they began to unfold, really made sense for a time in that world. One thing that I realized, though, is you can talk about visions. That's widely accepted. You can talk about angels. That was widely accepted. You could talk about prophecy. That's very widely accepted. But when you start saying that you have messages from grandma, all of a sudden that opens Pandora's box to something else that is not as widely accepted. And so I began to realize in my late teens, early 20s, even going through the beginning part of seminary. In fact, I'll take you back. It's a very small, very, very small white building. I can still picture it to this day. This rural road in central Alabama. And I was the associate pastor of the church. And in my experience at the time, I thought, this is the rest of my life. When that's all you know. That's what I wanted. I wanted that for the rest of my life. And then the experiences, the visions, some of the encounters that I was having in my own bedroom at my grandparents' home growing up didn't really seem to jive as well with that world. And so began to see all of these different things. And so I surrendered my credentials to pursue a road that was a little more fulfilling. And that's really what began to, in some way, cause me to question things. Still have so many dear friends in various religions. So many people sometimes even now think, or people that would have known me from that time might think, well, he's done this because he's lost his faith. I wouldn't say that personally. I think that all of this began with faith for me, and it's still a part of my life in my own way now. But I like to say, and something that I try to share with people, is that the Spirit speaks a universal language. And no matter where you're from, no matter what your experiences are, the spirits are calling to us in different ways. And I think I still wrestle with that. Even all this time later, I still struggle with that, because that was a chapter of my life that I'll always be grateful for. That's where it started, but it's not where it ended. It doesn't look like that now.
Well, I really appreciate that. It's interesting. When I started doing this, as I got older, a lot of people started asking me, well, where did this come from? And, nobody can remember, those that remembered my parents or their families growing up. No one has acknowledged in the family on either side anyone doing anything like this. So it seems to be I'm the only one that has this, and there's a small conversation out there in certain circles that they think that it skips a generation, or, but even people in my family that are still alive that would have known more of my grandmother on my mother's side than I would have remembered, or more of my nana on my father's side, and so on and so on. And no one has been able to put this together. So,
Wow.
did you have anyone in your family? I know with the religion, but did your grandmother or mother, anyone ever say, like, I had a dream that came true, or I saw
Yeah.
something that wasn't there? Like,
Absolutely. In fact, that's, and in fact, I've never publicly been asked that before, but you bring up you ask the best questions. I love you. Thank you for bringing that up, because for me, even though I think through my religious experiences, it helped to provide some foundation to begin stepping into this a little more. But my grandmother, well, let me go back just for a moment. My grandmother came from Japan. She married my grandfather. He was in the Navy. And so she comes to, why she left Tokyo to come to rural Alabama in 1950, I'll never know, but I'm glad she did. I wouldn't be here if she didn't. But so they come to rural Alabama, start a family, have three daughters, the youngest being my mother. So there was always this, I think, in the background, even growing up, I could always sense this sort of, if I may call it, mysticism in the background, possibly because of part of my Asian heritage, but this sense of art. My grandmother was an artist in Japan, so it opened me up to this whole other world of seeing things in different ways. She was a vital part of that for me. But my mother specifically, even now to this day, she and I will text about different experiences that we're having. I'll never forget this, and this is something that, looking back, I think this is something that happened in that formative period in my life when I began to really pursue visions, dreams, psychic experiences more. I'll never forget this, Catherine. My mother told me once, she said that she had a dream, and in the dream she saw my grandfather, her father, being very, very sick and having to take him to the doctor, and she saw him just having all of these pains. But she said that in the background of the dream, she saw two very large buildings, very large towers, and there was smoke rising everywhere. Didn't know what to do with that. 3, 4, 5 months later, I'll never forget, I was still living at home at the time. I was in college in my hometown. Woke up that morning. She said, I think I have to take Papa to the doctor. And she did. As soon as they leave, I'm watching the morning show, getting ready for class that morning. And the Twin Towers were struck that morning. And it was 9/11. And looking back, there are several stories like that. And so I do think that some of that does run in the family. I don't know how to put that together. And I'm also very curious about some of the history of that. But I know that she does have very, very strong psychic experiences in her own life. So I do credit a lot of this to her.
Well, you're very lucky that you share that with her, because it's not just being able to share it, but also being able to feel that you're understood. Because when other people don't have those similar experiences, you can tell someone, I had this dream and then it came true, and you don't always get the reception that you would expect to. They would say, how do you live like that? Or doesn't that bother you? Or are you afraid to share what you had as a dream because people have seen it come true before? So I really think that that's really special that you're able to kind of connect with that. The only story that I really have from my mom that I talked about in my second book was that when we were born, she selected a song for my sister and for me. And it was a song that was popular around that time. And I thought it was like her personal way of making us special. And my sister got Raindrops Keep Falling on Your Head, which is a very popular 60s song. And mine was a Carpenter song that says eyes of blue and all of this, kind of a, yeah,
Yes,
remember that one, right? So, I always thought to myself, like, mothers have such a connect with their children. And unfortunately, my mother struggled for most of her life as an alcoholic. So I didn't have a lot of connection with my mother due to her struggle with alcohol. However, when I kind of go back and remember things like that, I realized that, she had the motherly connection. So do you remember a story about your mom either having been pregnant with you or having you as a little boy that she kind of identified? Like sometimes families have like, why were you named Kenneth, or how did she come up with something,
Yeah,
And I always
yeah.
find that connection, especially when
Mhm,
adults still have a connection with their parents,
mhm.
some of those very early stories are so, magnetic. So,
Yeah, yeah. I'm actually named after my grandfather. My mother's father was named Kenneth. And here's a little behind the scenes that many people may not even know, even after all this time. A lot of people may not realize this. My family name is actually Busby. So from my father's side of the family, they're from more so from Yorkshire, England. But growing up in the South, people always had a difficult time spelling that. And also, no one wanted to call me Kenneth because of the fact that, well, is that you or your grandfather? Who are we? Who are we talking to? So when I had a few things years ago, when I had a few things published, it only made sense to go with Kenneth Drake, which is my middle name. so with that, that's sort of where that came from. But Kenneth is actually from my grandfather. It's from my mother's father's side of the family.
wow, that's so interesting. I know it's interesting because I understand the South. I spent a lot of time in the military. I had been to Alabama, I think twice. And, the area that I was in wasn't as rural as you're explaining. But I do remember the town that I was in that had one Italian restaurant. And my team of
Really?
soldiers and I, yeah, went to the same restaurant, I think, for like 5 out of 7 days we were there. And it was just like, they're here again. Like, it's quite obvious we were military people. But
I'm
I
trying to think, where would this be? What part of
well,
Alabama
it
would
would
that?
have been very near one of the bigger towns.
Maybe Birmingham,
Yeah,
perhaps
right
Birmingham.
outside of Birmingham, because we would have been
Okay.
visiting an Army Reserve unit. We used to go out and teach military decision making process to Army Reserve soldiers. So, yeah,
Okay.
so it would have been a town or two away from Birmingham. So you could see how, So very interesting. So I want to move into the idea that as you move past the idea that you were going to be, a minister, and then
Mhm.
realizing that that really wasn't the path for you, you're in college. What were you going to specialize in? Like, were you just jumping up saying, I'm going to be a professional psychic medium? Or
No,
was
no,
was there more
no,
behind
no,
it?
no,
Yeah.
no, no. Oh, such a great question. This came through lots of kicking and screaming to myself, multiple thoughts of suicide, a lot of scandal, a lot of addiction, several arrests. In fact, uh, with a lot of alcohol throughout my 20s, doing every single thing I could do to silence these voices. And one thing that I share with people, or something that I try to share. Thank you for bringing this up. People that may be listening, they may not realize when they see us or you and I together, or with everything that you're doing, with all that you're accomplishing, or they maybe see me at an event. There's only so much time that you have to spend with people, and they see the lights or signing books. They see all of this, but they don't know really the road that we've taken, you and I both, in our lives and our experiences to get to where we are. And for me, I have to say, I call it a very violent encounter. And I use that term literally, but really it was this violence with this war with myself. And that's what I really mean by that, this inner war with myself. And for most of my early 20s, I was a mess. And part of the reason I believe in miracles today is I tell people it's a miracle that I'm still alive. It's a miracle that the spirits didn't take me out when they could have on multiple occasions. It's a miracle I didn't take myself out. So I really tried my very, very best to drink this away, drug this away, and got into some very public scandals with it, quite honestly. And I always try to be honest with people about that, because when we think of psychic development, or when we think of let's say, the unfoldment of mediumship, mediumistic capabilities, something that I even share with students now, is we think of sunshine and rainbows and butterflies. We don't think about screaming in terror when you wake up from a dream that you don't understand and you see shadowy figures standing around your bed. Well, that's the part we don't talk about. And sometimes in the spiritual community, or even in, well, the paranormal community, sometimes we're not the best at defining what that means and what those experiences look like. For me, it was horrifying in my early 20s, and I didn't know where to turn. And when I told the church about it, it was, we don't talk about that. Or when went to even the beginning part of seminary, began to realize that this isn't talked about, but it is common. And I think that was part of the turning point for me, where I began to realize, even though we're not talking about this, even though we're sweeping some of these experiences underneath the nearest church rug, it's not very popular to talk about this. It's very taboo, in fact, but it is very common. And I began to realize that, and I have to thank my own personal guides for this, and my own ancestors and my own team that I work with. If it's your calling, it's going to keep on calling. No matter how painful it is, no matter what you've gone through, no matter how much of a mess you made, and God knows, Catherine, I made a mess in my early 20s. But one thing I realized was, if it's your calling, it's going to keep on calling. And somewhere in that process, somewhere in the mess that I had made, I realized that these experiences are serving a purpose. The voices are serving a purpose. The emotions, walking into rooms, feeling overcome with emotion, not knowing what to do with it, the crippling anxiety, all of that, I didn't realize it was serving a purpose all along, and it was another world speaking. And so as I began to pursue that more, and even that process of pursuing that, and I always want to be very honest with people, I still have not arrived. I still tell people that I'm still a student, no matter what I've ever done, no matter what I've ever been fortunate enough to have accomplished. I think of myself as a student. I'm always going to be a student of this. And I think that's perhaps in some way, if I've ever seemed relatable to people, maybe it's because of that, or I hope in some way that's relatable to people, that we're not alone. And I know it seems that we are, but that's been my message all these years. If I have a message to share, it's that the spirits are speaking. You're not alone. And some of those messes that I had made in my early life, I look back and I realized, well, this happened for a reason. This led to that. This led to this connection. And not realizing that for most of my life, and even in that period of my life, I have to say I was living a little bit of a double life, quite frankly, without even realizing that I was doing it, because I still had one foot in this religious world. It's all I had known. And then I was having these experiences. And so at some point, through all of the messes that I had made in my early 20s, it's like the universe was asking, which choice are you going to make? Are you going to surrender to this or not? And ultimately, I had no choice but to surrender to this. And I'm so glad that I did. But now looking back, the things that didn't make sense at the time make a lot more sense.
Wow, that is really profound, your story, and you are correct. You're very lucky that you made it through and saw it, to the other side of that. So many people are what I call self-tortured, that no one knows, that are in so much pain and in turmoil that they don't kind of share it with anyone. I find it interesting because of your association with the church. When you started to share this, did they kind of proclamate that this is coming from the devil?
Mm. Yes. Yeah, I would say yes. Great question. One of my very, very first public appearances, as far as spiritualism would be concerned, and I want to preface by saying, at the time, at the turn of the millennium, spiritualism wasn't really a term that I was even familiar with. So I always try to explain to people, it wasn't as though it was even making the choice was this easy choice, because the terms that we sometimes use, for me, those terms weren't very clearly defined, quite honestly. Psychic was a very negative word for me in those days, just because of my upbringing, just because of the culture that I had been raised in, particularly in religion. So to even say psychic experiences, that was a very off-putting term to a lot of people. Miracles seemed very safe. Prophecy seemed very safe. And when I say that, for a long time, looking back, I feel as though I was living a double life, sometimes without even consciously realizing it, because I was using these safe words that I'd always known. But looking back at some of these experiences, public events where messages began coming through, messages from loved ones in spirit, seeing people healed, even physically healed, people getting out of wheelchairs. There were parts of the rural South at the time that accepted that, because that was very common in revival type settings. But looking back, the mechanics behind it, what I was actually seeing, loved ones in the spirit realm giving messages to people. Looking back, I now realize that that was an open door to spiritualism, even though I didn't really identify with the term spiritualist at the time. So it wasn't until much later that I realized I'm not alone in this. And there's an entire group of people throughout the world that actually practice this every single day. And I think for me, that was very healing, realizing that not only am I not alone in this, but there are avenues that can be taken to actually develop this more, where we have this community of people who say, not only are we not alone in this, but we actually have a community where we can share experiences with each other.
Yes, I'm so glad you mentioned that because Arthur Findlay is a college in Stansted, England, and they are a spiritualist facility. And those that belong to the SNU, which is the Spiritualist National Union, are members of that. So I got introduced to Arthur Findlay actually by John Holland. And John
Yeah.
Holland, yeah, John Holland actually saw a clip of me doing a reading in front of James Van Prague. And when John Holland saw the clip, he sent me an email and said, "You need to go to Arthur Findlay, like immediately." And
Immediately. The first
immediately,
flight out, immediately.
exactly. So it was kind of interesting because I had to explain this to my dad.
Mhm.
And, I had been home from Iraq and everything. And I said, "Dad, these people think I need to be tested." I said, "I'm not a spiritualist, but they think I need to be tested. So let me see if I could really do this." So my dad agreed because he really didn't believe in charlatans and he didn't want any association with anything that could have been accusatory in that vein. So I went over to Arthur Findlay and met a lot of the tutors that were all part of this SNU. And I worked directly with Simone Key. So tell me your experience with actually becoming a member of SNU and then, becoming a spiritualist, because there's 7 things that they believe in. And then, your experience working with the college.
Well, yeah, I've never actually worked with, as far as being a tutor or working with the college. But I think for me, for myself, one thing that the Spiritualist National Union, I would say, was crucial in for my life was helping to give the understanding that there is a philosophy behind this, that it's not just people floating around having these experiences, that there's meaning to the experience. And although I'm not currently a member of the Spiritualist National Union, I've, over the past, I would say 5 years, 5 to 6 years, even pre-COVID, really want to devote more time, some of my resources to spiritualism here stateside through the National Spiritualist Association of Churches. Also here, where I'm at now, just outside of Chicago, several spiritualist camps. Spiritualism is actually a major hub here in the Midwest, surprisingly. A lot of people are surprised by that. A lot of spiritualist camps, a lot of spiritualist organizations. One of the most historic here is Camp Chesterfield, which is like a spiritual home to me whenever I have the chance to be there when I'm not on the road. But I always think back to those years when I had this experience. This was uh, decades ago, but I had this experience where I didn't even know who to turn to with some of these psychic experiences. And it had gotten to the point, quite honestly, where I had become almost a recluse for part of that decade in my 20s. Didn't want to do anything publicly. Didn't even want to go to the store. Didn't even want to go to the market. Didn't want to go to the coffee shop because of what I would see and what I would feel when I was around people. Now, through that, developed several connections to practicing mediums, not realizing that a lot of them were from the United Kingdom. So we would meet on social media or email, back and forth, meet in different forums online. And this common theme seemed to stand out. And the theme was spiritualism. And I didn't realize at the time that so many of them were being drawn to this magical place called the Arthur Findlay College. And so when I became a member of the organization, Spiritualist National Union, part of what I think was so, for me, what I learned through that was this emphasis on the philosophy. Not only with the seven principles, of course, it's a little different here in the United States. Many spiritualist churches here have the nine principles, but there's the basic foundation of that life goes on, that we're all learning, that there is no death. When I think about the Fox sisters and the way that this all began, and even that wasn't really a beginning. There were two girls having experiences, but people have been having these experiences from the very beginning, since the dawn of humanity. But when there was this advent of what we call the advent of modern spiritualism with the Fox sisters in Hydesville, the Rochester knockings, all of a sudden this tidal wave of psychic phenomena begins to open up, because for the first time we're open to it. We're open to it. And one thing that I've personally had to really give credit, well, I credit spiritualism for helping to cause me to, in some way, develop a philosophy of my own with this, because of the fact that, and that's not to say that anyone has to share my philosophy. One thing that I share with even students now, part of my work over the past, I would say, 5 to 6 years, has been teaching mediumship development, even through COVID. That actually was something that we began to do for the first time in a very long time, but something that I even share with students or even other psychics or other mediums. It's to say, look, you don't have to have my philosophy. It doesn't matter if we share the same philosophies or the same beliefs, but I want you to know that what you're experiencing means something. Find what that means to you in your own life. Find what that looks like to you. And the philosophy, as I read back and even read some of the work of even Gordon Higginson with the Arthur Findlay College, books about him, some of his experiences that he had, even wonderful mediums that are practicing today, seems to be this common theme of the spirit world wanting to partner with us in some way, no matter what we've gone through, no matter what our beliefs are, partnering with us to do something to prove. And not that we have anything really to prove, not that we're preaching to people to try to convert someone to a certain belief. Those days are long gone for me. But the proof of we're in this together, we're not alone, and these visitations, these encounters that we're having are happening for a reason. I always tell people, and this is something that you and I have spoken about before, is sometimes when it comes to the paranormal, what we call the paranormal, I'm sometimes the odd man out in that community. I have nothing but respect for all of my friends in the paranormal, and it's been a big part of my life all these years. But I have to say, sometimes I feel like the odd man out. Sometimes I think the paranormal community doesn't really know fully what to do with me. And that's all right, because sometimes I don't really know what to do with it, quite frankly. But this idea of paranormal, well, sometimes it's a misnomer to me. It's not really paranormal. It's just normal, quite honestly, to me. And so when I see or I think of what we're calling so much of the world today is calling paranormal. All respect to that. And I love it. It's so much fun to be a part of. But I tell people that I'm not a ghost hunter. And I think that's where many people, for me, they either lose interest or we stop talking because we don't know what to do with that if you're not ghost hunting. And with all respect to my ghost hunter friends, I always tell people I'm not a ghost hunter. I'm not hunting ghosts. I'm a medium. Spirits are hunting me. Why would I spend time chasing something that's already chasing after me as part of my daily life? So it just doesn't appeal to me. And that's the only reason that I don't consider myself a ghost hunter. But even though I have so much respect for all of my ghost hunting friends, but I think as far as the philosophy, back to that concept of this philosophy, the philosophy is that no matter how you're having these experiences, I think you're having these experiences not because it's just a hobby. I think you're having these experiences because the spirit world is calling you.
I have to agree with that. You bring up a lot of good points. One in particular is the paranormal. And I've been invited on so many different investigations, but I'm specifically invited because I am the medium. And that's why I find it really interesting, because I don't follow any of those TV shows. I don't know any of those, TV shows or the people that are in the TV shows. I don't know it. I don't follow it. But it's interesting because when you're on an investigation and there is a medium like myself, I'm able to bring through information that actually makes sense. So in August, when you and I worked together at Charles's event, which was, I think, Connecticut Paracon, I was demonstrating with Dan Sturgis from the Travel Channel. We had done an investigation together probably 15 years ago at the Merchant's House, which is a very haunted, very old house in New York City, more than 100 years old. And he had saved all of the EVPs. And you can hear me asking questions, and you can hear spirit reply. And it was so interesting because when we played it, you can actually hear everyone in the audience go, oh, like you could hear them like breathe in, like, wow, And it was funny because during the investigation, I said, what do you do on Sunday? And they had servants in the facility that worked Monday through Saturday historically. And Sunday, there was no one there to help the main family that lived there. And you can hear a woman's voice, high pitched, say, I cook and I clean, like that, so clearly. And, in their world, in the paranormal world, that was evidential. Because when you go back into the history books, all of their ledgers and all of the documentation shows that no staff worked on a Sunday. So to be able to pair that up and find the accuracy was just phenomenal. So can you speak
By the way,
of...
you stole the show at Paracon, by the way. Your presentation was incredible. I love
Well,
that.
I love
Love
working
Dan,
with
too.
Dan. Dan Sturgis is amazing. But tell me about some experiences where either you've captured, your questioning on EVP, or you've been able to provide information to the team, because, and you're totally right, going out ghost hunting, they're capturing information, but can they piece it together? Do they form a story without having the actual medium there?
Such a great question, and I think that's in a positive way. I mean, there are so many positives. I have no stones to throw in any direction with the paranormal when I say that, but I think in a positive way, people seem to be becoming more open to the fact that this, as entertaining as this is, and it is entertaining, and it makes for great entertainment. And I'll be the first to admit that it does. And entertainment is such a big part of what I've done on the stage all these years. So I so respect that. But I do believe that we're reaching this point, seemingly through collective consciousness, where people seem to be understanding that this is more than just entertainment. This is starting to open up some deeper belief, some deeper philosophy. It's something that I share. This is something I've spoken about publicly only a handful of times, but for me, one of the turning points was a case that I was invited to work on in Hyannisport. This mother had reached out to us talking about these experiences that her young daughter was having. And when the daughter's boyfriend brought something into the home, all of these strange and unusual occurrences started happening. This is a normal family of the Roman Catholic upbringing. The boyfriend brings in, his father is a collector, collects old antiques, vintage items, oddities, if you will. And he brings into the mother's home what she described as a skull, just a normal skull, something from the father who collected oddities, hanging on the wall. Immediately, according to the mother, immediately shadow figures start appearing in the home that night, banging on walls, terrifying experiences, things that you would see in a horror film, according to the mother, began to happen. And they reach out to the church for a home blessing, and nothing can be done. Uh, Reach out to friends that don't know what to do. Somehow, long story short, and I don't know how it happened, but I was brought in to this. And I'm so thankful that I was. But through that, I started to realize there is some connection not only to this item that everyone's looking at. Ghost hunters were looking at the item, focusing on the item. Within 2 weeks of this skull being brought into the home, the mother says that the daughter becomes suicidal, begins having suicidal ideations. Before that, she was a normal 12-year-old child. The mother says that once this item is brought into the home, not only is the child having suicidal ideations, but she starts hearing a voice speaking to her very sexually, very romantically, talking about how this being wants her. Now, while all these investigators or people, other teams that have looked at this, or other psychics, other mediums have looked at this, they're looking at the object. This is some cursed object, some haunted object. But one thing that I found through my work and through psychic mediumship, travel to Hyannis was actually in the home. So as we're in the home, I begin to realize this isn't a matter of the object. This is a matter of some trauma that's in some way surfacing in her, which this being, this entity, this negative attachment has connected itself to. Now, long story short, it brings up this, and I won't go into this just for privacy of the family, but it brings up this whole issue of sometimes in the paranormal, I think we're focusing on the wrong things, quite frankly. And even though it makes for good television, there are very real people with very real traumas behind the scenes. And Catherine, that's one thing that I love about you. I adore that about you. The fact that you've always been so real. You keep it real. And I know in some of the conversations that you and I've had, just even privately, I know you keep it so real. But even what you were sharing a moment ago, piecing the information together to tell a story, not only a story, but this is one of the many things I love about you, not only tell a story, but to tell the correct story. And I think if anything, that's what I'm seeing more and more with some of the things that I'm involved with now, is anyone can tell the story. And a lot of people are very interested in telling the story, going to these supposed haunted locations, telling the story. Quite frankly, a lot of it's for the TV deal or for the network deal or for the book deal. Not realizing that behind the scenes, there are very real people having very real experiences and have opened up very real doorways because of very real traumas in their own lives that these entities, these energies are attached to. So while ghost hunters, all of our ghost hunting friends, all of our paranormal friends are telling these stories, my question is, are we telling the right story? Are we telling the correct stories? I know you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say this, but there are so many people telling stories about a lot of locations, and the stories are very entertaining. They're wildly entertaining. So entertaining that Hollywood comes calling, and they've built brands about these locations. Not to say that they're not fully haunted, but my question is, are the stories accurate? Was it really a witch that lived in this home? Or was it just an older woman who had been traumatized by the community? The stories matter. And I think that's my message to the paranormal community. While we're doing this work, however you're doing it, as entertaining as it is, these stories matter. People's lives matter. And that's where, and this is why I share that, because the spirit world is interested in our intention. And I see that, and I'm seeing it in my own life, and it's taken me decades to learn this. I'm still learning it. The spirit world is drawn to our intention, and that's where the accuracy comes in. Because if the spirit world thinks you're just in this for a gig, you're just in this to get invited to this other show, this is what I share with students. And I believe it with all of my heart. It's something I try to live by. I'm not always the best at it, but I'm striving for this. The shows are going to end. My tours are going to end. Book deals are going to end. Television lights are going to end. This connection to the spirit world is not going to end. And so, what I really want to encourage people, those that are out there listening, that you're having these experiences, or maybe you're drawn to the paranormal, I want to encourage you to know that this connection is real. What are you going to do with it? The spirit world is calling you. What are you going to do with this? And I think that's one thing that you've always brought to the table, Catherine, is your not only your accuracy with your work and your readings, but just the authenticity of these stories matter. And with what you were sharing, that's so beautiful. It's so powerful.
Wow. Well, your story is incredible also. And what you said is so true. I just wanted to go back. The item was called a skull. What is that for our audience? If they're not familiar, what is that item?
Yes. Well, for this particular item, I'll never forget the. I say I won't forget, but I actually did. I did just forget. I have to look back. This was in my mind. I'm thinking back. This was right before COVID. This had to have been 2020. So when the mother reaches out, she says that the daughter's boyfriend has brought in what she calls an ox skull. It was the skull of an ox picked up from an oddities or curiosities shop. Something about that, as we were hearing that, as I was feeling that, it just didn't really seem to jive. So I began to ask more questions. Is this what type of ox skull? Where was it actually purchased? The consignment shop, where did they purchase it from? So I'm asking all of these questions.
What is a skull, though?
The head of a ram. So
Ah,
she says that it was an ox skull, but it actually wasn't. The more we delved into this, it was actually the skull of a ram that had been used in a ritualistic sacrifice.
so a
So,
skull is actually like a depiction of something. Is that what you're saying?
oh yes, yes. Oh, great question. Yes. So the daughter's boyfriend brings in an actual skull into the home. And what I was realizing through this and some of the things that the daughter was talking about was that there was this actual trauma tied with what she was hearing very sexually explicit things, which opens up this doorway to has there been sexual trauma in the family for her to be hearing these things? This horror that she was experiencing or that the family was experiencing, might it have been that this energy psychokinetically, if we were to refer to it as this trapped psychokinetic energy, that it was manifesting in the home because of repressed trauma physically, even in members of the family. So, because of their own traumas, they begin to open up this door this entity was feeding on. Skull representing structure, skulls representing the interior parts of who we are, the deeper parts, what make us who we are. And I love you. The fact that you even bring that up. I think symbolically that was such a big part of this because when we think of a skull, we think of what's housing the mind, the brain, that we think of that even symbolically of what's internally housing our thoughts, our belief systems. So the skull represented a deeper emotion, it represented deeper thoughts. And now, just as a side note, too, this young girl who's not so young anymore, several years have passed, she's one of the finest mediums that I know now. And she's practicing because of some of these experiences. So what seemed so horrifying, it was not only a turning point for the family, it was a turning point for her to realize that the spirit world really, as horrifying as some of these things are, the spirit world really has no interest in frightening us. The spirit world is interested in calling us to partner with us. And so major credit to that family for inspiring me with that experience. I was so honored to have been a part of that.
wow. So this is really incredible. What you said earlier is your intention is so important. And it's interesting because one of the things that they say so frequently at Arthur Finley is we're here to serve spirit. And that is so important because, like you said, the successful people, you have to know your intention. So, your first mission is to serve spirit. We're not here to serve ourselves. And I think that's where the fine line comes between why you're doing this work. And it's interesting because so many times people say to me, why would you want to do that work? And they're not, like you said earlier, they're looking at what could be considered things that are associated with fear instead of looking at things that are associated in being helpful. And the majority of working in mediumship and communicating with those that are passed on, the foundation of that is grief work. And the reason why people want to connect with loved ones and friends and family is because we miss them. And not just we miss them, but we love them. So the ability for a medium to connect with spirit on the other side, the recipe for that is love. So we're able to bring through such meaningful messages because of the love that's on the other side to connect with. And it's so incredible that the meaning of these messages, like a lot of times you could say, well, what's the evidence of spirit? You could say the person is a woman or the person's a man or the person had this hobby or this nickname or all of that. But to be able to say, why are they coming through? And in my experiences, and I always say that I give what I get, the key to that is not everyone that comes through may have been able to express themselves the way they wanted to in life. So either, they were blocked by either alcohol or addiction, or they were being blocked with an argument where someone wouldn't open the door and allow the conversation to continue. So a lot of times on the other side, when they come through in a reading, they have that chance to come through and identify what the problem was or to kind of go over what had happened. And we don't allow someone to say, I want to connect with this person and this particular name and that, because that's not how it works. It's we open ourselves to the spirit world, and whoever we are able to identify comes through. It also doesn't mean that if we didn't bring them through that they're not there. And
Right.
that
Great.
is so
Yeah, great.
often in a reading. Someone says, well, how come my mother didn't, chime in? She was always chiming in. And I said, well, maybe that's why. Because she was always
That's so
chiming
true.
in.
It's so true.
Someone that
Yeah.
may have not been able to come through is coming through now. So
Yeah.
I want to get to your personal experiences, like doing private readings, and then we can go on to your experience as Hollywood's haunted psychic.
Well, it's something that you had just shared, Catherine. I love, I can't say it. I wish I could brag on you all day and tell you how much I love you, because just the things that you say, and I've enjoyed this conversation already so much, because these are things that people sometimes just don't really think to ask, quite frankly. And as much as I've always enjoyed having conversations with people for interviews or just in meeting people, these are questions that never really come up. Something that you had mentioned, and I still feel like I'm the 17-year-old boy from the rural South when I start talking about mediumship, because it excites me because of the fact that I'm hearing you talk about these deeper thoughts, the deeper philosophies. And I'm reminded that so many times as mediums or as psychics, it's our job to tell the story of this person's life. And sometimes we forget, myself included, that their story is still being told. They're still telling a story on the other side. And that's one thing that the philosophy of spiritualism has really encouraged me with, is that the reason that the Father comes through, I'm using this as just as an example, the reason the Father comes through to say that I'm sorry that I wasn't there. I'm so sorry that I wasn't at the birthday parties because I chose work over the family. Or the mother comes through and says, I'm so sorry that I left the family. It was too much. I was trying to find myself. the reason that, or grandfather comes through or grandmother comes through to talk about all these experiences from childhood, the reason these things come through, it's not just for us, it's not just for our healing. You were saying something that's really one of the mottos of the Arthur Findlay College and a philosophy of spiritualism, that we're here to serve spirit. Part of the reason I think these messages come through is because the reason the Father is coming through is not just to apologize for not having been there. The Father wants to be there now. So there's this whole experience of the story that's told is continuing. They're still telling this story. They're still wanting to be a part of our lives. I remember when after my grandfather passed, I started with sharing the story of this vision, this dream, this premonition that my mother had. My grandfather passed from leukemia just within 2 months of that experience that I had shared earlier. And I'll never forget, just a few months after that, we were in Birmingham and gone to this cafe, this little cafe that was always one of his favorite cafes. At the time, I was 19 years old. And we went there just as a way to remember him. So everyone's ordering dinner, and we order his favorite dessert, and we leave it at an empty seat at the table. Now, looking back, I didn't realize, growing up in my religious upbringing, that spiritualism, that recognition of those and the recognition of their stories, that spiritualism, leave this dessert there just as a way to say, we know you're here with us. That gets the spirit world's attention. Those little moments like that, getting the birthday cake, enjoying the birthday cake with family, or listening to the favorite song. One thing that I see with even psychic readings that I'm doing, mediumship readings that I'm doing, even whether it be for a network or one-on-one private consultations these days, which I don't do as many now, but even the readings over the years, it's that what I'm seeing is not only is their story still being told, they want to be an active part of our stories. Can't even tell you how many times grandfather or dad or mom brings up, hey, what about that new guy you just met at the coffee shop last week? What's going on with that? Have you texted him back yet? Or it sounds
Yeah,
so.
that's amazing. I love that though, and you're right. As a medium, we like that because it shows that their last living day was not their last seeing day. And it's right on. Yeah, I love it. I want to make sure that we get you plugging your website and all of your whole career of Hollywood's Haunted Psychic. They can find everything on your website. Just plug your website and so they can find you at some upcoming appearances.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Got a few things coming up. Going to be in Evansville, Indiana for HorrorCon on March 1st. Starting last year, this is really my first time doing this. I've always been behind the scenes as sort of a voice on the phone, sort of like a more flamboyant version of Miss Cleo, if you will. I've been the voice on the other end of the phone for a lot of these years, but now it's a good time to get out there and finally get to meet so many of you out there. But you can visit mediumkennethdrake.com. Also, we're in the process of revamping that with a few of these changes, because we're doing so much more now with so many newer appearances. But you can visit us at mediumkennethdrake.com. That's under construction now. It should be up within a few days, but it'll have all of the tour information. Also have Paranormal Rockdown coming up. Hope to be back at Paracon. Hope to see you there again, Catherine. Also in Salem again this year. But also have a 2-night event at the 1771 Infield House coming up, which I'm so honored to have been invited to. But would love to see so many of you out there, and thank you for being a part of my life all these years.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to have you on. We're going to roll out with one of your favorite songs by Fleetwood Mac, Seven Wonders.
I love it.
Thank you again.
Long ago,